Let me see what the commentary says about this 168. Commentary says, the king represents karma, the criminal, the worldling, the 300 spears, the rebirth consciousness. The time the king gives his command is like the time the worldling is driven towards rebirth by King Karma. The pain from being struck by the spears is like the resultant suffering in the course of existence once rebirth has taken place. So it's a bit similar when the rebirth consciousness goes into the embryo. Once he's that being in the embryo, once he's come alive, then the consciousness is painful to him. So because that being in the embryo is like half alive, like this man, this criminal struck by the 100 spears each time, he's already half dead. So in the same way, the embryo is half dead, half alive. So every time the consciousness comes to him, it's like being struck with spears. So that's the sutta. Now 12.64, that's Savati. Monks, there are these 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. What for? The nutriment, edible food, gross or subtle. Second, contact. Third, mental volition or volition. Fourth, consciousness. These are the 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. If monks, there is lust for the nutriment edible food. If there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, there is a descent of name and form, or nama-rupa, mentality, materiality. Where there is a descent of mentality and materiality, there is the growth of volition. Where there is the growth of volition, there is the production of future renewed existence. Where there is the production of future renewed existence, there is future birth, aging and death. Where there is future birth, aging and death, I say that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. Similarly, if there is lust for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, I see that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. Suppose monks, an artist or a painter, using dye or lac or turmeric or indigo or crimson, would create the figure of a man or a woman complete in all its features on a well-polished plank or wall or canvas. So too, if there is lust for the nutriment edible food, or for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established there and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, I say that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. If monks, there is no lust for the nutriment edible food, or for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is no delight, if there is no craving, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, there is no descent of mentality, materiality. Where there is no descent of mentality and materiality, there is no growth of volition. Where there is no growth of volition, there is no production of future renewed existence. Where there is no production of future renewed existence, there is no future birth, aging and death. Where there is no future birth, aging and death, I say that it is without sorrow, anguish and despair. Suppose monks, there was a house or a wall or a hall with a peaked roof with windows on the northern, southern and eastern sides. When the sun rises and a beam of light enters through a window, where would it become established? On the western wall, Venerable Sir. If there were no western wall, where would it become established? On the earth, Venerable Sir. If there were no earth, where would it become established? On the water, Venerable Sir. If there were no water, where would it become established? It would not become established anywhere, Venerable Sir. So too, monks, if there is no lust for the nutriment edible food, for the nutriment contact, for the nutriment mental volition, for the nutriment consciousness, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, I say that it is without sorrow, anguish and despair. It's the end of the sutta. Earlier we read a sutta saying that if there is planning, if there is planning to do this and do that, or there is a tendency towards something, then the consciousness will be maintained. So it also says if there is no planning and desire, but there is still a tendency, then consciousness will also continue, be maintained. So here in this case, this lust for the nutriments, the various types of nutriments, will prolong existence, prolong life. So if there is no lust for the various nutriments, as there is no condition for consciousness to become established, just like this beam of light, if there's no wall for it, no floor for it to become established, it would not become established anywhere. The next sutta, 12.65, Atsavati. Excuse me. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still a bodhisattva, not yet fully enlightened, it occurred to me, alas, this world has fallen into trouble in that it is born, ages and dies. It passes away and is reborn, yet it does not understand the escape from this suffering headed by aging and death. When now will an escape be discerned from this suffering headed by aging and death? Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does aging and death come to be? By what is aging and death conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom, where when there is birth, aging and death comes to be. Aging and death has birth as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does birth come to be? When what exists does existence come to be? Clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the six sense bases, mentality, materiality, by what is it conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is consciousness, mentality, materiality comes to be. Mentality and materiality has consciousness as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does consciousness come to be? By what is consciousness conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is mentality, materiality, Namarupa, consciousness comes to be. Consciousness has Namarupa as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, this consciousness turns back. It does not go further than mentality, materiality, Namarupa. It is to this extent that one may be born and age and die, pass away and be reborn. That is, when there is consciousness with name and form, and Namarupa as its condition, and mentality, materiality, Namarupa with consciousness as its condition. With Namarupa as condition, the six sense bases, with six sense bases as condition, contact, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Origination. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. I stop here for a while. So here the Buddha is repeating what he stated in other suttas, that he considered carefully, then he understood how suffering arises. And then he says here that consciousness turns back on this Namarupa, because as I mentioned before, consciousness, vijnana, and Namarupa, mentality, materiality, they arise together and cease together. They always come as a pair. You cannot have one without the other. So here it says that when you have Namarupa, then you have vijnana. The condition for Namarupa is vijnana. Similarly, the other way, the condition for vijnana is Namarupa. So vijnana, consciousness, and Namarupa, mentality, materiality, or here name and form, they depend on each other. Then monks, it occurred to me, when what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be? With the cessation of what does the cessation of aging and death come about? Then monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is no birth, aging and death does not come to be. With the cessation of birth comes cessation of aging and death. It occurred to me, when what does not exist, does birth not come to be? When what does not exist, does existence not come to be? Clinging, craving, feelings, contact, six sense bases, Namarupa. The cessation of what does the cessation of Namarupa come about? Then monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is no consciousness, mentality and materiality does not come to be. With the cessation of consciousness comes cessation of mentality, materiality. It occurred to me, when what does not exist, does consciousness not come to be? With the cessation of what does the cessation of consciousness come about? Then monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is no mentality and materiality, consciousness does not come to be. With the cessation of mentality and materiality comes cessation of consciousness. Then monks, it occurred to me, I have discovered this path to enlightenment, that is the cessation of mentality and materiality comes cessation of consciousness. The cessation of consciousness comes cessation of mentality and materiality. With the cessation of mentality and materiality, cessation of the six sense bases, cessation of contact, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Cessation. Thus monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. So similarly, here the Buddha says, by considering carefully, he understood how there is cessation of suffering. Suppose monks, a man wandering through a forest would see an ancient path, an ancient road, travelled upon by people in the past. He would follow it and would see an ancient city, an ancient capital that had been inhabited by people in the past, with parks, groves, ponds and ramparts, a delightful place. Then the man would inform the king or a royal minister, "Sire, know that while wandering through the forest, I saw an ancient path, an ancient road, travelled upon by people in the past. I followed it and saw an ancient city, an ancient capital that had been inhabited by people in the past, with parks, groves, ponds and ramparts, a delightful place. Renovate that city, sire." Then the king or the royal minister would renovate the city, and some time later that city would become successful and prosperous, well populated, filled with people, attaining to growth and expansion. So too monks, I saw the ancient path, the ancient road travelled by the perfectly enlightened ones of the past. And what is that ancient path, that ancient road? It is just this noble eightfold path, that is right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection, right concentration. I followed that path, and by doing so, I have directly known aging and death, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. I have directly known birth, existence, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, six sense bases, mentality and materiality, consciousness, volition, their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. Having directly known them, I have explained them to the monks, the nuns, the meal, leave